lunch with thin toast and thin china on a porch from which an arroyo dropped down for 100 feet. Fir trees scented the air, and a talking machine played the same Russian music that was popular that same moment in New York. And the Beaches knew people who knew Claire. Claire was thinking. These people were genuine aristocrats, while Jeff Saxton, for all his family and his assumptions about life, was the eternal climber. Milt, who had been uncomfortable with Jeff, was serene and unself-conscious with the Beaches, and the doctor gratefully took his advice about his stationary gas engine. He's rather like the Beaches in his simplicity. Yes, and his ability to do anything if he considers it worthwhile, she decided. After lunch, when the doctor and his wife had to trot off to a patient, Claire proposed, "Let's walk up to that ledge of rock and see the view. Shall we, Milt?" "Yes, and keep an eye on the road for Pinky. The poor nut, he hasn't showed up. So reckless, hope he hasn't driven the Teal off the road." She crouched at the edge of a rock where she would have been frightened a month before, and looked across the main road to a creek in a pine-laced gully. He sat beside her, elbows on knees. "Those Beaches, their kin are judges and senators and college presidents all over New England," she said. "This doctor must be the grandson of the ambassador, I fancy." "Honest, I thought they were just regular folks. Was I nice?" "Of course you were." Did I wash my paws and sit up and beg?" "No, you aren't a little dog. I'm that. You're the big mastiff that guards the house while I run and yip." She was turned toward him, smiling. Her hand was beside him. He touched the back of it with his forefinger, as though he was afraid he might soil it. There seemed to be no reason, but he was trembling as he stammered, I'm damn glad I didn't know they were anybody, or I'd have been as bad as a flivver driver the first time he tries a 12-cylinder machine. Gee, your hand is little." She took it back and inspected it. "I suppose it is, and pretty useless." "No, it isn't, but your shoes are. Why don't you wear boots when you're out like this?" A flicker of his earlier peremptoriness came into his voice. She resented it. "My shoes are perfectly sensible. I will not wear those horrible vegetarian uplift sacks on my feet." "Your shoes may be all right for New York, but you're not going to New York for a while. You've simply got to see some of this country while you're out here. British Columbia and Alaska. Would be nice, but I've had enough roughing. Chance to see the grandest mountains in the world, almost, and then you want to go back to tea and all that junk. Stop trying to bully me. You've been dictatorial ever since we started up." "Have I? Didn't mean to be. Though I suppose I usually am bullying. At least I run things. There's two kinds of people. Those that give orders, and those that naturally take them. And I belong to the first one. But my dear Milt, so do I. And really, and mostly I'd take them from you. But hang it, Seattle is just a day away and you'll forget me. Wish I could kidnap you. Have half a mind to. Take you way up into the mountains, and when you got used to roughing it in sure enough wilderness, say you'd helped me haul timber for a flume, then we'd be real pals. You'd have the stuff in you. But you still need toughening before... Listen to me, Milton. You've been reading fiction about this man. Sometimes he's a lumberjack, and sometimes a trapper or a miner, but always he's frightfully hairy, and he sees a charming woman in the city and kidnaps her, and shuts her up in some unspeakable shanty and makes her eat nice cold boiled potatoes, and so naturally she simply adores him. 100 men have written that story, and it's an example of their insane masculine conceit, which I, as a woman, resent. Shakespeare may have started it, with his silly Taming of the Shrew. Shakespeare's men may have been real, but his women were dolls, designed to please some majesty. You may not know it, but there are women today who don't live just to please majesty's fancies. If a woman like me were kidnapped, she would go on hating the brute. Or if she did give in, then the man would lose anyway, because she would have degenerated. She'd have turned into a slave, and lost exactly the things he'd liked in her. Oh, you cavemen, with your belief that you can force women to like you. I have more courage than any of you. I admit you have courage, but you'd have still more if you bucked the wilds. Nonsense. In New York City, I face every day 100 complicated problems you don't know I ever heard of. Let me remind you that Brer Julius Caesar said he'd rather be mayor in a little Spanish town than police commissioner in Rome. I'm king in Schoenstrom, while you're just one of the couple 100,000 bright people in New York." "Really?" "Oh, at least 1,000,000. Thanks." "Oh, gee, Claire, I didn't mean to be personal and get in a row and all, but can't you see? Kind of desperate. Seattle so soon." Her face was turned from him. Its thin profile was firm as silver wire. He blundered off into silence, and they were at it again. "I didn't mean to make you angry," he gulped. "Well, you did. Bullying, you and your men of granite in mackinaws and a much-needed shave, trying to make a well-bred woman satisfied with a view consisting of rocks and stumps and socks on the line. Let me tell you that compared with a street canyon, a mountain canyon is simply dead, and yet these unlettered wild men. See here, I don't know if you're firing these adjectives at me, but I don't know that I'm so much more unlettered. You talked about taking French in your finishing school. Well, they taught American in mine. They would." Then he was angry. "Yes, and chemistry and physics and Greek and Latin and history and mathematics and economics. And I took more or less of a whirl at all of them, while you were fiddling with ribbons, and then I had to buck mechanics and business methods. I also fiddled with manners, an unfortunate omission in your curriculum, I take it. You have been reasonably rude. So have you. I had to be, but I trust you begin to see that even your strong hand couldn't control a woman's taste. Kidnapping! As intelligent a boy as you, wanting to imitate these boorish movie. Not a darn bit more boorish than your smart set with its champagne and those orgies at country clubs. You know so much about country clubs, don't you? The worst orgy I ever saw at one was the golf champion reading the beauty department in boudoir. Would you mind backing up your statements about the vices of myself and my friends?" "Oh, you Oh, I didn't mean." "Well, then why did you? Now you're bullying me, and you know that if the smart set isn't vicious, at least it's so snobbish that they can't see any. Then it's wise to be snobbish, because if it did condescend, I won't stand people talking about condescending. Would you mind not shouting so? Very well, I'll keep still." Silence again, while both of them looked unhappy, and tried to remember just what they had been fighting about. They did not at first notice a small red car larruping gaily over the road beneath the ledge, though the driver was a pink-haired man in a green coat. He was almost gone before Milt choked, "It's Pinky! Pink! Pinky!" he bellowed. Pinky looked back, but instead of stopping, he sped up and kept going. End of chapter 20.